Welcome to the Sacred Feminine Power podcast, where we explore the many facets of feminine power and why it is so important for women and for men to step into this power in our world at this time. This is Emmy from Feminine Revered, and I am so very excited to introduce today's guest, Sasha Rose. Sasha is a seasoned astrologer with over 25 years studying astrology, spirituality, and meditation, alongside a career as a massage therapist and decades managing nonprofits and working as an educator who focused on experiential methods that foster freedom and empowerment. All of this influenced the creation of her unique Heroine's Journey framework. For the past 13 years, she's coached women using the secret astrology of Venus to support the rise of feminine leadership. Recognized as a leading expert on the Venus cycle, Sasha has revolutionized a method for women leaders to align with this cosmic feminine rhythm to support them to bring their big dreams into reality. She shares this rich framework into practical, accessible, and embodied understanding that women can apply immediately to create meaningful changes in their lives, refine their leadership, and fulfill their sacred mission. That is so beautiful and so powerful. Welcome, Sasha, to the show.
Thank you so much, Emmy. I'm blessed to be here and thanks for the opportunity.
No, it's a blessing to have you with us, and I can't wait to see where our conversation takes us today. But as my podcast is called Sacred Feminine Power, I'd love to start by asking you, what does sacred feminine power mean to you personally?
I love that question. Yeah, sacred feminine power to me is having an intimate relationship with that spark of the divine that lives within us and knowing how to connect with that, knowing how to move with that, and knowing that power doesn't always look like what the culture tells us power is. There's topside power of topside world power of having agency and creating and manifesting, and that's wonderful, especially when it's connected to that sacred feminine impulse. And then there's also the underworld power of learning how to transmute and compost those experiences that are not what we want, in a world that is based on war and violence, that we understand that that kind of power may not always look like winning. It may look like moving from love. And that may actually mean that we're going against the status quo, that we're really listening to the ancient wisdom inside of us. And that might put us on the outs with culture and society and family and friends. But that's the potency and that's the commitment to move with that. It doesn't mean necessarily that we're going to be the most popular woman in the world. But that honoring of the sacred feminine within, that builds our power in order to have clarity of what our purpose is and what we're meant to show up with and share, and when to hold silence. It's really that inner guidance to me is the sacred feminine power that we all have access to, and especially through what I call the heroine's journey.
That is beautiful. That power in the underworld and power through the underworld. That's beautiful. And that is such a sacred portal for us to dive deeper in just a moment. But before we go there, Sasha, I would love to hear a little bit about your own journey, and especially if you could share about a challenge that you have faced that's really helped you to activate this power within you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so interesting. I've been reflecting on this lately because I realized that if I had more of that topside world power of doing what I wished and moving as I wished and freedom and choice, and I wanted to pursue so many interests, and I have a very expansive mind and I'm interested in everything. And there's lots of labels we could look at that, like the human design of that, or being neurodivergent. There's all these ways that we can understand ourselves, but really seeing that in myself, that wanting to go out and explore and do everything. But the hardship that I had, it created a container, and without that hardship I probably would not have developed this body of work, because I wouldn't have stayed with one thing as deeply as I stayed with this. So I would say the main experience of that was in love and in who I chose to enter into marriage with and who I chose to have a child with. And not at the beginning being very clear about what our values were. I mean, I was very clear about what my values were, and I came into that relationship with a whole lifetime of being very natural and holistic minded and wanting to parent what would be called attachment parenting, and didn't understand that the man that I chose to marry was not on that page. I mean, the first time it dawned on me is when we were talking about, not dawned on me, but the first time it landed the implications of where we're going together in our journey to raise a child is when I wanted to have a home water birth. And he had a huge reaction to that and really wanted to be in the hospital and be in the safety of that, the cultural safety of that. And so that divide was really one of the most powerful experiences of my life, of now honoring the sacred feminine wisdom and protecting my daughter in a situation where I lost a lot of control because we did end up divorcing when she was quite young. And so how did I represent that and be in that fierce feminine wisdom when I knew that there was things that he was proposing that would harm her body and my intuitive sense of what she needed, which ended up being very accurate in tests that were done and certain vulnerabilities that she had, especially around a lot of the medical interventions. We live in a very medicalized society that wants to give our children injections right at birth and on this track, and so I really needed to represent, and oftentimes it felt like I was playing chicken with this energy that was very patriarchal or dominating, that wanted to force me to do something that I knew was wrong. And I just stood my ground, sourced in love of my daughter. And that was not easy, but every single major battle I won. In a sense, it felt like a battle, a battle to stay and be like, I'm not moving. My stubbornness itself actually was really a protection for her. And now as she's now 20 and older and more able to understand herself, I just see that was really important for her and her body and her mentality to see me do that protection. So I would say that's the biggest example in my life. I wouldn't wish that upon anyone because that's such a sacred act to raise a child together. And it's interesting because Venus is so much about values and what we value, and so those core values, I don't think it's unusual that couples don't have enough conversations and dig deep enough into those values before they decide to come together in marriage and child raising. And of course, there was other things at play, that it wasn't so simple like that. There was, karmic contracts probably and all kinds of other things going on. But that was really my training, was this fierce mama training to stay in that, and to understand that the soft is not always feminine, or the sacred feminine is not always soft, is not always surrendering and going along. Although I did a lot of that in my marriage to harmonize. Sometimes we need to be that fierce fire of protection. And then of course that extended into her school and society. And so by the time the big test came with the pandemic, I was very clear on my boundary, and I had been strengthened to really hold that no. And the pressure was on. Now it wasn't just her father. It felt like it was the whole world was saying my instinct was wrong, and there was this other way, and everyone should be doing this other thing. So I was ready.
Bless you. Really honoring your truth and your courage to stand your ground and be in that fierce feminine power when it was so needed. And at a time as well when there again would have been a whole lot of mainstream opinions that would have contradicted the path that you chose. So really, really beautiful. And thank you for doing that. Because it wasn't just for yourself and your daughter. I think you served a much bigger role there as well, whether you were conscious of it at the time or not. So
yeah, I was, and I was definitely like the only parent speaking out at the school about policies and whatnot. So I just want to like give a shout out. I feel like I'm a veteran of an invisible war sometimes, and we don't honor that war. So big love to all the mamas out there who also, in whatever way, listened to their guidance and protected their children. I just think it's such an incredible act of love that often goes unrecognized.
Yeah, absolutely. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us today as well, because I think you've just provided a whole lot of medicine for our listeners as well. What would you say to those mothers who didn't have the courage or didn't have the wisdom or the knowing at the time that their babies were born to stand their grounds and might not even have known that there was a need to protect their kids? What would you say to them? Because they might be having like alarm bells going off right now or feeling a sense of guilt or shame.
Oh, yeah. So part of the sacred feminine path is so much forgiveness, so much self-love, so much knowing that we can always start with the current moment and do repair, and I wasn't a perfect parent in any way. I mean, I was definitely a cycle breaker, of a lineage of a lot of abuse. So I'm not painting myself as some kind of saint. I think we all make those mistakes. There was things that I didn't see. Absolutely. I mean, with the phone, I feel like I could have just handed my daughter crack cocaine, basically, and I didn't realize it at the time. So, she now says, like, I hate my phone. I wish phones weren't invented. And I'm like, I am so glad that you see this, and I am so sorry that I didn't protect you from that more. So there, we live in a dominator culture, and we've been entrained into that and conditioned into that. So we absolutely need to extend ourselves a lot of love and grace and start from the now and the awakening of the awareness. As soon as that arises in us and we begin to see and perceive, we need to celebrate that instead of beating ourselves up for that, because that is where the patriarchy, if we want to call it that, I like to say dominator culture, just because it feels like it's, I don't want to make men wrong. I want to look at the power abuse to be wrong. So I'd be careful about that a little bit. But I feels like that's where that dominator energy lives within us, is we awaken to new awareness about something, and then we turn back on ourselves and we beat ourselves up for not doing it the right way. Um, that punishment isn't helpful. It's that, like, oh, now I see. Oh, now I see. And nurturing that forward.
Beautiful. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that as well. Now, having gone through those challenges and having experienced what you did, what would you say was the hidden blessing or the hidden meaning in all of that?
Yeah. So it really taught me about the heroine's journey. And in the heroine's journey, and because I was an astrologer and I discovered the Venus cycle, which we're going to talk more about, there's this constant theme of looking at how there's that birth energy of inspiration and creativity and being able to be an agent in the world. And I think a lot of women who are in business, who are really in business to change the world, who have their sacred work, their purpose is in their business, we need that energy of the visioning and the feeling into how it can be and what we want to bring forth, very connected to our own unique gifts. And so there's that kind of energy. And then there's the trials and tribulations that bring us down into what I call the underworld, where there's limitation and there's a stripping away of who we thought we were and our identity, and seemingly a loss of power. And then we find a deeper power. And when I've been the most deeply rooted in my heart knowing, in that sacred feminine that lives, I feel like the heart is a portal into that place where I connect to the divine. It's right within our body. It's this actual felt sense of that. When I have tapped into that and deepened into that, there's a place there where I have experienced freedom, no matter what's going on outside. It's this inner journey of touching into my own nature as a resource, because I did have, because of that marriage and because of the way that played out, and then the financials of that, which I think for women is a huge issue, that we have a lot of freedom around our financials, but there's still ways that our financials are tied to men and power and the way that that gets played out. There was a lot of limitations in raising my daughter and in my path and what I wanted to accomplish. And I could really honor that deep place and learn from that deep place of going in and going deep and having empathy cultivated from that. Because when you have everything go your way and it seems like, what's the problem? Why is that person over there not doing what I'm doing? It's so easy to project that kind of topside world experience. Some people would call that privilege or whatever. I don't really like to use terms that make people wrong, but there's a lack of empathy. And so this deep empathy can be cultivated when we come up against those restraints in our own world, especially if we're visionaries and we're expansive and we're dreamers and we want to be creating the new world. We're like, isn't it happening already? I've been dreaming into this new world since 2000. It was 25 years of almost being able to smell it and taste it, like, oh, this is what we could be doing. And this time that we're in is so much about purification and meeting those obstacles and those breaks in relationship as we stand true to who we are. And so I would say that was one of the biggest gifts, is this developing of my own empathy, self-love for myself, and empathy for others in their journey. And then that ability to rise again after the hardship, that phoenix energy of going, okay, and I'm coming back to creation after feeling destroyed or after feeling disheartened or after, the disappointments. I hope that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Heck yeah. Thank you for sharing that as well. And let's talk a little bit more about the heroine's journey and the Venus cycle, and how these are connected. I know your work is deep and beautiful and potent, and I've had a session with you as well around my own Venus cycle. And I think it's such important medicine for everyone at the moment. So let's dive a little bit deeper into that as well.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the incredible mm, resource, knowing our own, I call her inner heroine, which is really illuminated by the astrology of Venus. So we usually know our Venus sign, and that's a great place to start, because those qualities, if Venus is about love, connection, how we give and receive, bonding, being able to harmonize in conflict. I say Venus is the golden key to the age of Aquarius, because it's the relational, it's the care codes. And so when we know our own, when we know, oh, this is my sign, oh, those qualities, because we have lots of parts to who we are, and many of us lead with the masculine because that's how we thought we could be powerful. Many of us are very, very head oriented, of course. We grew up in a culture that's like that. So when we begin to understand the qualities of our deeper heart self through Venus, then we can cultivate those and elevate those and have awareness around those. Oh, these are my qualities. Those are going to help me have that magnetism and really attract those that need my medicine, and attract those partnerships, attract those collaborations. So that's a very important a part of ourselves to know. But then there's also the cycle that we're born into, the cycle energy that it will ripple for an entire 19 months. And so that consciousness, whatever sign that is, in where the sun and Venus meet, they create the seed of light. And that is very powerful, to have the illumination of the sun with Venus. The sun is also about life force and energy and generosity. And the sun is connected with heart, so we have these two forces coming together that open the cycle, and they're closest to the earth. So they're really gifting us the intimacy with that energy. They're like, here, want to go on a heroine's journey? This is the theme for 19 months. And we can keep meditating on that, because Venus will move signs She won't stay in that same sign. So, there's a little complication to the mechanics of it, but once you start to move with it, it's amazing to see how the understanding is more embodied and less mental, but oftentimes we start with the mental. Um, so it's good to know what that energy is for ourselves. What cycle was I born into? What phase was I born into? Was it the reset phase where she's really at the end and the beginning? Am I a bridge maker? Is it the morning star where I'm this bold heroine going forth and I need to make a lot of mistakes in order to understand myself more? Am I an underworld Venus, where Venus is behind the sun and invisible and extended 2.5 months, sometimes more, where we can't see her, and we're in that intimacy with the underworld mysteries, the hidden realms, the occult. What's hidden is occult, right? So oftentimes these women hold a lot of medicine, to be therapists, to be shamans, to really understand the depths of psychology. Or am I an evening star Venus who's gone through the initiation, stripped myself of what was false, my masks, my nice girl, what I thought I should be? That all comes off when we go into the underworld. That's the invitation. And it's really such an acceleration of our awakening to who we are. And then when we go through the underworld and come out the other side to the evening star, it's like, okay, now I know who I am, and I can begin to relate more authentically and relate to other more authentically. I have myself. I'm not giving myself away. I'm not martyring myself. I'm not sacrificing myself. And I'm showing up in relationship to other and seeing what comes back. And so I can be of a greater service in that way. And so there's a certain maturity of quality of those evening star Venuses in the cycle. I mean, there's none is better than the other, but when you know your motion, when you know your phase, when you know your sign, when you know your cycle, it activates something inside of us that's truly extraordinary, that I call the inner heroine, or some might call it our inner goddess, whatever words point to this part of us that is so incredibly strong in a feminine way. And that water way, the way of the feminine, the way of water, is it carves mountains. It drips into a potent force of change, but differently than some other forces. So we awaken something within us that feels like it's an infinite kind of strength that draws upon more of our soul than some of the more superficial astrology might. The personality astrology, although that's good to know too. So in the heroine's journey with the astrology, it's like, how do I bring all the parts of myself together in this council and really allow my heart to be the queen, allow my heart to be the one that's feeling into those deep desires and dreams and visions and creations, and then bringing them forth through my mind in service to heart, through my outer action, Mars, in service to heart, through my moon, which is the conditioning and my story and my mother lineage and all the pain of that and all the blessings of that and rewriting of the story of that. And oh, here's my reactions. Oh, that's what my inner one needs. That's what my inner child needs. We're bringing all of those into council within ourselves and keeping the focus on heart first. And knowing how to fortify that place within us and move from that place so we can bring our unique gifts and medicine no matter what happens in the external. So there's something about this cosmic support that really fortifies us, and I've just seen it in so many women over the years. I call it syncing with Venus. And it's amazing to see the amount of synchronicities. It seems like that act itself of aligning our awareness with that cycle in all of the ways that we can, and we can talk more about that, it amplifies the synchronicities in our life, and we begin, maybe we become more aware of the synchronicities that are already there.
Beautiful. And you're expressing this all in such a graceful manner as well. It's just lovely to listen to you. And even though we've had a session on this already, you've just given me a couple of huge insights around my own journey as well. So thank you for that as well. But yes, let's talk a little bit more about how we can personally align with those cycles and some important things that we need to be aware of as we move forward on our journeys.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is one of my favorite invitations I love to give women is to start syncing with Venus consciously, because what I've found is that women who are in contact with the sacred feminine, they're on that path, they're feeling that within themselves. They're already aligned with this cycle. They just don't know it yet. And then once they wake up to the, oh my goodness, that date, that thing happened. Wow, 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 right? So it's likely that women who are attracted to you are already in touch within themselves with the sacred feminine, and probably a lot of them are working with the moon cycle, the new moon and the full moon, because that's
Mhm.
a very easy way to look at the seed and the fruit of an intention, of an energy. And so when we start to sync with Venus, we begin to bring into our consciousness that there's a larger cycle, because the moon also has its own birth, fruition, death, reset. Every month we have that mini cycle with the moon. And for many women, that correlates with their bleeding, with their menstruation. And so it's this very visceral experience in their body of the shedding and the fertility, and all of that's at play. And so this larger cycle of the 19 months is just to know the dates, because once we know the dates, then we can reflect back on, oh, okay, that's what arose in my life, because it's our lived experience that counts. It's not like, oh, this date arbitrarily. We use that date to reflect, okay, here's the date. And for this particular cycle, it's March 22nd. So it's very connected to that equinox energy of spring in the northern hemisphere. But regardless which hemisphere, the energy of Aries, we're in a Venus and Aries cycle. So we begin to contemplate, what is Aries? Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. It's initiating fire. And so anyone really, you don't have to be an astrologer to be like, okay, initiating fire, what's that about? Feel that in your body. That spark is going to light the whole journey through the zodiac. So it's got to be strong. It's got to be bold. It can't be like, oh, is it okay if I spark now? It's got to be like, I'm sparking, I'm here, So that's the Aries energy that's strong. It's not asking permission. And the beautiful thing about Aries energy for women who often do overthink and do hesitate in many ways from expressing ourselves fully, there's a beautiful quality of that Aries energy that is not self-conscious. It's not, oh, how is this going to look? It's just do first, think about it later. And that's medicine for a lot of us. I mean, obviously not everyone. We all have different personalities. I'm sure there's women that are already that way and maybe need some medicine in the other direction. But for many of us, and especially this particular cohort of women born between 47 and 58, we are in what's called a Chiron return, which happens to all of us at about 50. But in my view, whatever crew is up for that, they hold fresh wisdom for the collective, because the Chiron shows us our deepest wounding. And so for those women, there usually is a hesitation because their Chiron's in Aries. So there's a wound around having agency that this Venus cycle can particularly help to heal. But give me some of that medicine where I'm not thinking about it first. I'm just doing, especially as our bodies have changed and we're not as attractive as we may have felt we were in younger years. And that's real. When our hormones start to change, everything about our face and our bodies can change very quickly. So we don't have that layer of our identity that we used to have, where we could feel this confidence in ourselves in a certain way. And it doesn't mean, even if we're not measuring ourselves to a societal standard, there's the, oh, I used to be cuter, like, oh, I used to feel a little sexier, and now here I am in this midlife transition. And how do we keep showing up and really begin to show more of our inner beauty. And for some women, they rock it and they don't have those kind of changes. And, there's of course a full spectrum, but I think there is a phenomena of not recognizing ourselves in the same way, and not being able to lean into the beauty in the same way as we used to when we had more physical vitality and in just our features and all of these things. So it's ironic because that's the moment when society pretty much tells us like, oh, you're over the hill, you're done because of those changes. That's the moment when we're in touch with our greatest wisdom. That's the moment when our lived experience is ripening inside of us and we have so much to give the world. And yet there can be that hesitation of, oh, can I kind of, is it good enough? Or especially now, especially in the online space, it's just so noisy. Like how am I seen? And can I be seen? And sometimes I feel like the most authentic, powerful midlife women, just in this current reality, don't necessarily have the greatest visibility just in the noise of it. And yet whoever's at that gate right now, it's that crew of women. There's another one coming in a couple of years. They actually have what the collective needs. Mm-hmm. So this particular Venus and Aries cycle, if you're in that group, particularly if you have your Chiron and Aries, it is such a huge blessing to heal that wound and say, I'm showing up. Maybe it's a different kind of confidence in who we are and a boldness. So there's some way we're all meant to be bolder and brighter in this Venus and Aries cycle. But I'm just shouting out to that particular group of women because we need you. We absolutely need your wisdom. Even if you don't get that reflected back to you, it's so needed and so necessary. And especially because that group of women really holds the memory of what it's like to live and to relate before tech, the organic relationships in the real before the phones came in. And that's very, very important, that memory, not just nostalgia, but actually the formation of our brains and how we know to relate and have conversations that is being lost in this current moment. So there's always something to be learned from the Venus and Aries cycle, no matter what age you are. But that Aries energy will inform us all the way through October of 2026. So we want to keep meditating on that. And if you're a little more advanced in your astrology and you understand the degrees, that's 2 degrees. So anytime something comes to 2 degrees of Aries, it's like that sticks. Like what I do when I have sessions with women, we put that, we can put that point in their chart and in their awareness so that they go, oh, okay, this is what we're meditating on for the sky medicine for this particular journey, because there's so much to focus on. So what to focus on? I mean, you could go onto Instagram and be barraged with astrology, and they're like, this is the most important. This has never happened before. This. And you're like, oh my gosh. Well, yes, we are moving through a 26,000 year age change. There's a lot going on with a lot of the astrology, but what's most important? I say heart is most important. I say care is most important. I say creating a new paradigm culture based on connection and equality and honoring each other is most important. Well, if we think those things are most important, we know to look to Venus, and especially in her cycle with the sun, because then's her power. She's illuminated. That's the sacred light codes of the feminine. So that's something to know the dates. And then if you do opt into the gift that I gave, you'll get an email with a calendar for this cycle. So then you can look at all the dates coming. And one of the most important to know, aside from that seed moment, March 22nd, is that every month Venus meets the moon. And so we have this incredible opportunity to actually go out. And in the morning star, that's going to be morning pre-dawn. So you got to get up early for this, but it's exciting because you will be rewarded with such beauty, with the balsamic crescent last moment of that moon meeting up with bright, bold morning star Venus. And when you begin to have a relationship with that event, you begin to have a relationship with the way that the cosmos connects to your land. Because it's like where is east? How do I see this? Will I see her today? Oh, there's clouds. Oh, okay. If I go over here on this hill, I get a better view. Oh, wait, she's moving, because she's always moving. She was right there and I was getting to see it. Now she's moving here. So you begin to be that bridge between sky and earth in your viewing, in your senses, in your relationship. And that also connects you to all the other women on the earth. And there are many who are also getting up early. It's that sense of collective spirit of there she is. And so we have Venus as what I consider, because of her dance with the sun and because of the way her larger cycles work. Um, this 19 months, 19 months, 19 months creates this 5-pointed star over 8 years. And then that cycle, has a larger cycle where these Venus star moments, or Venus star points, as Ariel Gutman calls them, they actually ripple for over 100 years in the same sign. So in that heartbeat of meeting with the sun, creating the 5-pointed star, that has a much larger reverberation, which you don't need to understand all that and the numbers of that, but just to know that that gives Venus much more potency than just, oh, she's moving through a sign in 4 weeks. Oh, where'd she go? And even that, we get 4 weeks with a Venus energy. With the moon, it's like 2.5 days. So I felt at some point, after being very tuned into the moon and many rituals and moon worshiper and moon bathing and like, oh, the moon, the moon, the moon, when I was younger, that there was this shift that began to happen in my journey. And as I started syncing with Venus, where I could really feel that my orientation moved to Venus in her cycle, which includes the moon, but it wasn't solely the moon, because then we're putting ourselves solely connected to not just our history. Even think about full moons. It's like this emotional intensity, but then all the history of women on this planet and all the pain body, because the moon really represents not just the feeling, right? But the emotion is the feeling plus the story. So that's really amazing information to see what comes up, what the emotions need to be moved, they need to be tended to. It's such sacred work. And yet the other element, what I find with Venus as the evolutionary feminine, is when we strip away the story, we receive it, we honor it, we know we're rewriting it, but we really come into a visceral practice of feeling the feeling and allowing that to transmute in our heart. No story. It's like our heart becomes the cauldron and can hold whatever, hold rage. And I think this is what in Tibetan Buddhism, these wrathful deities, they have these very fierce expressions, but they're not going out. There's not I'm mad at you and I'm going to, it's just this, that kind of anger is big energy, big vitality. And a lot of us are tired. We could use some fuel as long as we're not using that fuel to throw spears, so we need to be skillful. But that kind of ability to be in a relationship with our feeling body is an incredible power that I feel like syncing with Venus really fortifies within us. So those are some things. I mean, I encourage women to have a Venus journal for the cycle, a heroine's journey, and to make note about the synchronicities, about going out and seeing her and track it. And in the morning star, since we're at that time now until October, excuse me, I think it's I'll have to look at my map. I think it's November 1st that she dives into the underworld in this cycle. But in the morning star, that meetup of Venus and the moon is going to happen right before the new moon, right? Because the moon's in the very last balsamic before it goes. So it's really this opportunity to bring that evolutionary energy in at a moment when things are really like going into the dark of our emotional nature and whatever the story is and whatever the feelings are. And there's big feelings moving through right now, and like really bring that like that kind of like the mother can hold it all, the energy of love can hold it all, and bring that into whatever's arising for us before we plant that new moon. so we really get that blessing in the morning star before we start that new um, moon cycle for those that really work with the moon. So I would advise that and check it out and just notice the difference, notice the different quality when you gaze at Venus, and I have practices and support for that I encourage. So good if you could have your feet on the earth, bare feet on the earth. Like this is a next level earthing practice. So if you can have your feet on the earth and then your eyes and just soften and soften, and it's a sweetness to be in touch with our own body while we're doing that. Like really find yourself, find your heart, take those breaths, feel the earth, and then open and gaze and just be in this relationship of curiosity and receiving. And oftentimes, especially if we're not going for it, insight will come. Women will receive something from that relation because the light codes are actually going into your eyes. There's sun gazing, there's Venus gazing, it's a thing. And notice the difference between the light of Venus and the light of the moon. It's very, very different. And notice that in your body, just be a detective, be an experimenter and see how it feels. I do feel more with the moon, more of that stirring emotionality energy. And I wonder too, I don't know if it has something to do with going into perimenopause and then now in menopause, that I'm not cycling with the moon anymore too. So it's an even more distance from that kind of energy. It's like, I see you, I honor you, and I'm not in a primary orientation to the moon.
Mm.
And so something that women can do who are menopausal and not cycling is to do some kind of sacred douching every month, to really allow the womb to have that clearing. I just got this incredible resource from Diana of Diana Essentials here, who started an Ayurvedic school in my town in Northern California. So there was all these amazing Ayurvedic trained practitioners walking around in that town. She's quite a legacy, but she turned me on to kombu douching, and to just take some kombu seaweed and boil it up and then let it sit overnight, and then to put that in a douche. And oh my goodness, it was like having the magic of the ocean inside me. And of course, we're drying out a bit, where our hormones are changing, and so our whole womb and everything is changing at that phase. And it was just such a beautiful nourishment. And I was like, oh yeah, well, doing that once a month. So we're not having a cycle, but we're creating that same kind of cleansing of our womb space. Brilliant, brilliant. So I think that's one of the advantages of those wisdom years, is that we're more creating the relationship with the rhythm. We're not so pulled by the biology anymore in the same ways. So it feels like part of the blessing too. So now I'm integrating that into my practice. So if anyone wants to try it, I'd love to hear how it goes. I was in awe. I mean, I felt like my whole nervous system just relaxed so deeply. And I hadn't really ever, I mean, I wasn't like a doucher or something. It didn't really occur to me. I know that a lot of women do steam, so that's something else you could do. You could do a yoni steam, and make that sacred time, at the new Venus portal, if you want, or at the new moon, if that feels better to you. Whatever your guidance tells you is the right thing for you.
Oh, wow. You've just shared so much wisdom there with us. Thank you for that. I was in goosebumps for most of that. So appreciate you, Sasha. And if our listeners wanted to get in touch with you and work with you, what's the easiest way for them to do that?
Yeah, well, my site is venuswisdom.com. And you can definitely get in touch with me there, and you can get that free guide so you can find your sign. And even if you know your sign, the way that I design that guide is to look at the sign as a heroine's journey. So we tend to just say, oh, well, my Venus is in Cancer. But where is Cancer on that stop that begins with Aries and ends with Pisces? That's a whole flow in itself that can really bring new awareness of what that means to have that Venus sign. And, I packed it with other information to help beginner women who don't understand astrology so much to understand a bit more. So you can get the guide there and get connected to that. And I wanted to say that I my phone is flashing at me. I started out with calling my business Venus Rising. So for the first years, I was Venus Rising, and I really identified with that a lot. And then I realized that Venus wisdom honored that going into the underworld and coming back out. Going in, it wasn't just rising; it's also descending, and so that is Venus wisdom. And so that's where you can find me. And I'd be so honored to connect in whatever way. And if you sign up for the free gift, there's an invitation to give feedback about what you discover about your sign. And I love, oh, that is just my favorite, is to hear how women speak to the energies inside themselves, because I can share my own Venus qualities, my Venus design, my Venus avatar. I can share so intimately what that feels like in me, and I'm born in a Scorpio cycle, and my Venus is in Scorpio. So I have such felt sense wisdom of that. And then I'm very intuitive. So I've tuned into, okay, what would that be if it's this cycle? And what would that be if it's this sign? And, I think I have a good take on it. Yet to hear a woman speak of it from her own experience is just exquisite. Like how she describes it, it's like, wow, I learn all the time. It's like, okay, here's the hints, here's the context. Now you share your embodied wisdom, and it's gorgeous. So yeah, always love to hear how women receive the activation.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing all that. And we'll, of course, share the links to your website and to your gift in the show notes as well. And yeah, Sasha, thank you so much for coming onto the show and sharing all these golden nuggets of wisdom, your own embodied experience, and how beautifully we can align with the Venus cycles and bring such depth into our own lives as well. Really, really appreciate you and all that you do. Thank you.
Thank you, Emmy. It's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me.
Blessed be. Beautiful. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in and for listening. And hopefully you have received those golden nuggets of wisdom as well. And just for a moment, let's tune into this powerful energy that's been activated, and imagine sending this energy to everyone and everything on our planet to remember that we are all truly one. And that the more of us have the courage to step into our sacred feminine power and start syncing with the Venus cycle as well, the more quickly our planet will also ascend and heal. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks for being here.